be sure to follow me on Instagram. There you can hang out with me and talk to me directly. Okay, so we are continuing on with The Boys, and I woke up a little bit ago. You guys get that extra sexy morning voice. As we go through the video, though, this voice is going to go away, so enjoy it while it lasts. But nonetheless, okay, so we're picking up with The Boys, and we're picking up with Volume 3. Volume whatever it is that we're on. Good for the Soul. Now, this one's pretty solid, right? Like, here's the thing about The Boys. Some of the stories are hit and miss, right? Like, some of the volumes are hit and miss, and a lot of you guys have picked that up already. A lot of you guys are kind of like, okay, so, like, not all of these are winners, right? But, like, a lot of them are. And this one I think is actually really, really good. And initially this picks up with Starlight. Right now, the character of Starlight has been having more or less like a crisis of conscience since she joined the Seven. That's been like the core basis behind her character, that she was a kid who was part of like Heartland America, right? She was there as part of the superhero team. She grew up, you know, as a superhero in middle America. It was a very conservative part of the country, kind of homey and kind of innocent in terms of how she functioned. As she grew older, she really maintained that mindset. So once she got into her older years, right? Like, and once she basically joined as part of the Seven, what she came to realize is that the superhero as she viewed it was not the way it was. But this is an interesting concept, because what it really seems to point to is the idea that there's the world in which we think it is, then there's the world the way it actually is. And the question is, if you have to choose one, which one do you pick? And that's been the struggle of Starlight, right? She's just kind of like this wide-eyed, innocent girl who's brand new to the world, doesn't really have any idea how it works. And then once she gets into it, she realizes, wow, it's totally different. And she has to basically find a way to navigate those waters. And that's one of the things that she's talking about. She's kind of sitting here, sort of speaking directly to Jesus. She's sort of like, I don't really know what all I'm doing. Like, I don't really know if I should believe in any of this. You know, she talks about how it's been 6 months since all of this really seemed to start. And she was sitting in on a meeting of the Seven. And when she was there, it was basically just kind of like, hey, there's this guy from Vought American that sits in there, and he's there with people that could tear his head off like that, right? He's there with people that could push their fingers through titanium. He's in a room with some of the most physically and capable, powerful people in the world, and he's in charge. He knows he's the one that runs the show. And that's what was always kind of interesting to me about The Boys, right? You know, you have these various characters here, you have these guys, and for those of you guys who know the answer to this question, don't spoil it. We're kind of running with the suspension of disbelief here, but you have like some super powerful characters here, some beings who are in a lot of ways gods walking the earth, and they're answering to a corporation, right? What stops them from toppling everything and just like conquering the world and saying like, we run everything now? Like, what military is going to be able to stop them? And so it's an interesting concept, because again, it really sort of hits home with her basically meeting with Vic the Veep. Now, Vic the Veep, the vice president at the moment, one of the things to talk about here, because we haven't really discussed him too much. We sort of left this as kind of a thing that was out there and haven't really had a whole lot of discussion with it. So the sitting president at the time is Dakota Bob. And Dakota Bob is a guy who does not want to have any superhero members of the community, right? The Seven or anybody else. He does not want their hands in like the military, right? He doesn't want them in the Department of Defense or anything like that. They stay over there doing their thing. The US government and so on stay over here doing their thing. Vic the Veep is really Vought American's answer to solve that question, right? Like, to basically get the president out and then have Vic the Veep become the new president and then implement policies that would be wildly difficult to reverse, to basically have like the superheroes as part of the defense system, right? The US Defense Department. This really shows us like the full-on desire of Vought American and really like what all it is they want to achieve, right? Because Vought American is not just a company looking to achieve mass amounts of wealth, you know, with regards to using superheroes as a means to, you know, get out there and sell comics and all kinds of merchandising and so on and so forth. Vought American is looking to attain power. And to be this kind of hidden clandestine hand behind the individual who runs the free world is a huge amount of power. And that's one of the things that Starlight really seems to struggle with, because as she goes through this and as she sort of makes her way, you know, through the Seven's headquarters, she begins to realize that like they're trying to find a way to get her out, right? They're trying to find a way to get rid of her. And the reality behind this is because she just doesn't fit in this world. She's too young, she's too innocent, she's too naive to really understand how the world works. And so it's a cool little thing here, because it's kind of like, is she capable of handling it in this world? Is she capable of making it here? Or is she just gonna be one of these individuals who kind of free floats, hoping she can change it one day and never really being successful in doing that? That's kind of the struggle that she's coping with. Now, again, those of you guys who know the answer, don't spill the beans. I know telling the internet not to do something is usually a terrible idea, but the fact remains here, there's a lot of things that Starlight's struggling with. She's really kind of having an existential crisis in a lot of ways. What am I doing here? Why is nothing what I thought it would be? It's a cool little discussion here, and it's a way to focus on her character in a way that we don't normally see. Now, from there, you switch over to Huey basically hanging out with the legend, or at least going to see the legend. Now, the idea behind this is he starts asking questions like, do Billy Butcher and them know? And the response is no, they don't know, that kind of thing. So it really looks like Huey is sort of doing something on his own. This isn't a huge thing at the moment, right? It's not a very big thing right now, but really the brunt of this first issue really focuses on the struggle of Starlight, right? Like, one of the things she says is like, I need to get back home. I need to get back home, get back to my roots. I need to go back and really, I need to see like the warmth of Drummer Boy. This kid that I was in love with, you know, the two of us were you know, kind of having our own thing, albeit in a more conservative fashion. I want to get back home, get back to my roots, peace and find some sense of normalcy. And so ultimately, she ends up traveling back to see Drummer Boy. Now, what you end up learning here is that when Starlight was part of like this, you know, kind of homegrown grassroots middle American superhero team, that when she was there, that it was kind of like she was literally the one who was kind of holding everybody back, right? She was one who was kind of like, we can't say like the S word and we have to keep it super conservative and super Christian. And like, you know, she was kind of the face of the team in a lot of ways, right? Like how people viewed her is how they viewed the team. And so for the most part, it kept a lot of people in order. But this is kind of the reality of the situation that she's in, right? Like nothing is what she's seen. And that's why it's important to keep in mind that while Starlight is an interesting character, she is incredibly naive, right? She's an incredibly naive and really sort of baseline character, right? But it is kind of interesting to see that sort of innocence in this environment and to see what this innocence will become as the series goes on. But again, it's sort of intriguing there because ultimately what she really begins to ask is God real, right? If God has a plan for everyone, then that means everything that's going on is part of God's plan, right? Like if God exists out there and God could stop these terrible things, then God's not stopping these terrible things, which means God must be okay with it, which means God's not what I thought he was. And ultimately, Starlight kind of seems to walk away, and that's when she runs back into Huey again. Now, up to this point, Huey hasn't really been a romantic love interest for Starlight so much as somebody that she can confide in, and even then, it was only ever really a couple of times, right? She doesn't really know him. And that's one of the things that she kind of says here, you know, when the two of them are talking, when he basically says, hey, look, you know, everything will be okay, and I'm somebody that you can confide in, she really like kind of starts spilling the beans about everything, about like not really everything she's done insofar as like performing inappropriate actions as she deemed it with members of the Seven, but at the very least in saying there's things that I've done over the course of my life, you know, recently that I'm not proud of, and it's called into question my entire view of God and whether or not he's real. My entire life philosophy has just been thrown into disarray, and I don't really know how to interpret it. But as she starts talking to Huey, of course, she really kind of starts hitting at the idea that like, I don't really know you, like I don't know you that well, but I feel like I do. Like there's something about Huey that really strikes Starlight in such a way to where he's someone that she can just kind of open up to. Now, this usually goes one of two ways, right? For every guy out there who's been in this boat, this goes one of two ways. Either it's, man, I can really open up to you because you're a great friend zoned, or I can open up to you and I could definitely see myself knocking boots. Like it's one of those, it only ever goes one of those two ways, right? Luckily for Huey, it goes the good way. Huey doesn't get stuck in the friend zone, and Huey gets a chance to knock those boots. And because basically like he asks her out, says, hey, like you want to get a drink sometime? And her response is like, yeah. Now notice this, gentlemen. All right, kind of sidetrack here for a second. Gentlemen, notice this, right? The guys who get the girls are the ones who make the move, not the ones who sit back like, I'm gonna be a gentleman and let her make the first move. No, because that is weakness. That is lame. You want something? Get out there and get it, right? The world doesn't just bring it to you, right? Women don't want a guy who just rests on their laurels, hoping that one day they'll get the girl if they tell her everything she wants to hear, and if they're nice to her 100% of the time, and if they never acknowledge her faults. No, you're gonna get laughed at, you're gonna get stuck in the friend zone, and she's gonna end up going out and getting somebody else. So be the one who makes the move, and don't be afraid to call people out, right? Like have some backbone. Now, from there, it switches over to the boys. Now, this is a cool thing about this, is because we knew the boys were keeping tabs on the Seven in a lot of different ways. What this shows is the resiliency, and it really shows like how deep reaching and how far down like these connections go. They've got a tap into a camera for like literally the meeting of the Seven, and it's one of those cool things because Starlight doesn't show up to it. So it's initially kind of like, okay, like Starlight misses a meeting of the Seven, which as we know is a big no-no, right? Because like Vaught American sits in on all the meetings, and if Starlight's not there, Vaught American is going to start asking questions like, why is the Seven incomplete? What's going on? Like, do they not have it together? Is there something like, do we need to consider replacing them? Like totally replacing the entire team with somebody else? Should we pull our funding and give it to somebody else? You know, give it to another group out there or something like that. It looks bad. It looks bad in front of the company. It looks bad in front of the business. Not only that, Huey has actually been tasked with tracking down like one of the superheroes that he basically killed. Now, for those of you guys who remember this far back, of course, this was Blarney Cock. Not really this far back. It was like 2 videos ago or something like that. But this was Blarney Cock, a member of the Teenage Kicks who was basically killed by Huey. The idea behind this was that Blarney Cock was somehow resurrected, right? Like he was literally brought back from the dead. The question is the brain going to be the same? Is it going to function in the same way? And what Huey's picking up from these various observations after being tasked by Billy Butcher to track down Blarney Cock and take him out is that no, his brain doesn't really work the same way, right? I mean, he's just kind of a shell of his former self, you know? And it's one of these things where it's kind of like, okay, like the Teenage Kicks are looking for a way to kind of get rid of him, but at the same time, they don't want to put off the impression to like anybody out there that they don't have their house in order, right? So like they're trying to find a way to sort of sweep this under the rug, get rid of it, and call him a day, right? Now, from there, you pick up with Huey and Starlight actually having their drink together, and it's kind of a funny thing because Starlight's never really consumed alcohol before, and this is kind of a smart move by Huey, right? Because the response of Huey, you know, when she's like, you should come back to my place, the response of Huey is, no, I don't really want to, and that's a good choice, right? That's a good call, right? Never engage in that kind of activity with somebody who's intoxicated, because who knows what kind of problems you could run into. But it's a smart move on behalf of Huey. It almost kind of makes him regretful, like, man, I really wish I'd gone through with it. Ultimately, he didn't, which again was essentially the smart move there, but it's something that he kind of gives himself a hard time over. Now, one of the small things that I want to point out here, this is kind of a small thing, I don't want to really delve too hard into this, but there's a moment where Mother's Milk goes back to his house and looks for his mom. Now, those of you guys who know why, like, don't say anything, but like, it's pretty screwed up. And like, we'll explain it as we get through this story. But I want you guys to keep that in the back of your head for a little while, because once we get to that part, you're going to kind of be like, wow, that's kind of, that's kind of messed up. Like, that's kind of wild and kind of screwed up. But again, there's some great moments that go on here, because ultimately what you end up having is kind of like this park, basically, where Huey and Starlight meet, right? I mean, the idea of like them going to a bar was kind of like, okay, I mean, this is cool and everything, but like, I feel like the park is our place, right? The place where we go, the place where we talk, it's pretty romantic, and it's actually kind of intimate here, right? Opening up to each other in a way that they haven't really done before. Now notice, they're not spilling all the secrets about each other, right? Huey's not like, hey, I work for this guy, Billy Butcher, and I'm part of a group called The Boys, and we're taking down soups everywhere we find them. I mean, he doesn't really say that to her. And she really keeps a lot of those things secret. Now, she's a little more open than he is, insofar as she's kind of like, yeah, I'm a member of the Seven, but at that point, it's really public information and unavoidable, right? So she's not really dumping anything that he couldn't already find out on his own, just by reading like a newspaper or watching TV when she was officially inducted onto the team. Of course, her not spilling the beans about the kind of thing she did is a way for her to kind of keep that barrier up and keep herself emotionally safe, so to speak. And it's sort of intriguing, because as the two of them talk and as the two of them sort of engage, there's a kind of romance forming between the two of them. While all that's going on, Blarney Cock basically makes his way into the apartment of Huey, and then Huey, once he arrives back there, Blarney Cock's standing there, his whole backside covered with poo, basically, and things are kind of popping off quite readily. This is a little bit of a humorous part here, right? Because when things start to get crazy, Blarney Cock can't really talk, right? I mean, he's just kind of there, right? He's not really the way he was before. He's just kind of nonsensical. He's almost kind of Frankenstein in terms of how he functions. Now, one of the things he does, where if you look at his words and he kind of sort of makes sense of them, what he wants is his hamster back, right? He wants his hamster back. He wants it to return. Ultimately, he starts pissing all over the place, but he wants his hamster back. And ultimately, the response of Huey is, no, you can't have it, because what you're going to end up doing is cramming this thing up your backside. And I rescued him from that terrible fate. A scuffle breaks out between the two of them, and Huey kills the guy yet again, right? So this is one of the things that I want you guys to notice. The nature of the boys, if you look at the progression of Huey, it's very similar to the progression of Starlight, albeit almost kind of opposite, right? Where Starlight's sort of moving closer and closer, right? Where she's getting a hard time by, from A-Train about the fact that like she missed the meeting of the Seven, and she refers to him as Needle and basically walks off, almost kind of takes like a sort of, yeah, celebrating it. When you look at her experience with Huey, where she's becoming really a lot more progressive in terms of like getting out there and not really waiting for marriage and different things like that. When you look at the progression of her character, she's really moving away from like this ultra conservative heartland America girl and like stepping more into the 21st century when this story takes place. When you look at the character of Huey, it's much the same way. Huey was a guy who started out with the boys and was like, yeah, I mean, I can be part of this, but like, I don't want to hurt people. Like, I don't want to do anything like that, and the responsibility Butcher comes with the territory, home slice. So if you want to do it, you better be okay with it. Getting into the scenario where he killed Blarney Cock the first time, and then this time killing him again, this really seems to kind of come to a head with the two characters when you end up having Huey traveling out to essentially the middle of nowhere, right? When he approaches Billy Butcher and he's like, hey man, if you had to dispose of a body and you didn't really want like CSI to find out that you did it or that you're involved with it in any form or fashion or to even be able to identify him, how would you do it? And the responsibility Butcher is like, I put him in an oil drum and set it on fire. That's exactly what Huey does, right? Like Huey takes the body, he goes out to the middle of nowhere and throws it inside of an oil drum and sets it on fire. He's met by the arrival of Billy Butcher. And it's kind of a cool thing, right? Because what Huey has done here is Huey's gone from a guy who basically didn't want to have anything to do with like inflicting harm on other people because it was such a terrible thing to do, really being innocent in a lot of different ways, to becoming a guy who basically took somebody out, even if it was done unintentionally, and then now intentionally disposing of the body. That's kind of the nature of the beast. He's progressing in a lot of different ways. And so is Starlight. The characters are changing and the characters are evolving. And that's why stories like this are so cool, is because you watch a person and you see them progress, right? It's one of the things you don't really see in comics all that often these days anymore. You see it with new characters, but Captain America is Captain America. He's been the same character for like since he's been in existence since 1941. Sure, elements of him have changed, but if you go and look at Captain America in Avengers number 4, right, when he first showed up again under Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, running all the way up until now, he's basically the same character. Batman is basically the same character. Superman, basically the same character. They don't change. They don't really evolve. They don't become anything different or anything from what they are right now. That evolution already took place, right? That evolution already happened for the most part, and it happened in an exceedingly short amount of time, if it even really happened at all, right? Like how those characters were structured and designed when they first popped up is for the most part how they've always been. But then you follow characters like Huey, who's basically this guy who was thrown into an impossible situation when his girlfriend or his fiance was basically taken out by a superhero who wanted to gain some kind of revenge, albeit what he was being has to do is pretty extreme, all the way up until now where he's disposing of a body is pretty intense. So that's kind of the cool thing, is that as the story progresses, his character will change even more. His character will grow and evolve even more, and he'll become something different than what he is right now. It's a cool change to see. You know, it's a cool kind of evolution for him. So again, The Boys is a pretty strong story, and this is one that I think really stands out the most, because I think what it really does is it highlights the evolution and the change of the characters more so than we've seen at any point up to this moment. So with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.